How's it going, everybody? My name is Dio Morales, your host of the Gold Squadron podcast, and we are back with our next installment of the Shipyard series. This is where we go through the lore of Star Wars and explore ships that have yet to be released in the X-Wing miniatures game. And we ask the question, what are these ships going to look like when they arrive? Now, important disclaimer here, everything here is speculation and completely unofficial. Let's have some fun. So today we're talking about the ship seen in The Rise of Skywalker that belongs to the Knights of Ren, that is the Night Buzzard. So the Night Buzzard is an Obliate class transport, but it is a modified version because the Knights of Ren have basically done some upgrades to it since taking it over. Now originally this was actually a torture ship from a planet that they raided and basically stole the ship out in the unknown reaches. So that's why this ship looks pretty dark. Well, it has a dark origin, and you know, the Knights of Ren are inside. Now, as for their modifications, we know that the Knights of Ren not only modified the internals of the ship, they also worked on the engines as well as the outside look of the ship, giving it its very menacing design. Looking at the dimensions of the ship, it was kind of hard to decide exactly where to put it. It's somewhere in between a medium and large base ship, but I think because most likely FFG would end up placing this ship in with the First Order, they don't have any medium base ships yet, so let's go ahead and assign them a medium base. As for the dial, since we know that this ship would have been before basically a prisoner transport, it's not originally going to be very maneuverable, but the Knights of Ren, as stated in the visual dictionary, did do some modifications to the engines, so this is what I put on that dial. So we gave the ship a 0 stop maneuver. At the 1 speed, it has 1 hard reds, 1 blue banks, and 1 straight blue. At the 2 speed, we have 2 hards that are white, 2 banks that are white, and 2 straights that are blue. At the 3 speed, we have 3 banks that are white, and a 3 straight that is white, and then we're going to go ahead and include a 4 forward as well. For its turnaround maneuver, we're going to go ahead and give it a 4K. At first I kind of thought about giving it a sloop, but it is a very long ship, so I'm thinking that that movement might not be realistic for the ship. It would have had to completely turn around to change directions. Now, one of the big highlighted things when it comes to the modifications of this ship is the fact that they modified the engine. So I thought it'd be really cool if we added a ship ability that featured those engines. I'm going to go ahead and call it Modified Thrusters, and it reads, after you execute a maneuver, you may perform a boost action, then gain 1 deplete token. For those of you who don't know, a deplete token is a red square token that lowers your attack value. You can get rid of that deplete token by performing an attack or by executing a blue maneuver. So if you watch The Rise of Skywalker, when this ship is shown on screen, we actually see black smoke coming out of its engines. So since the visual dictionary talks about those engines being modified, the thought here is that they're able to push their ship a little bit farther by diverting power to those engines, but it's going to take away some of the power from the weapon system. I think that's a good trade-off. Hey, we need to go a little bit faster, but we can't quite hit as hard during that turn. As for its actions, we're going to give it 4 different options, but no linked actions. So these are focus, target lock, reinforce, and boost. So focus and target lock, pretty self-explanatory. Now let me talk about the bottom 2. So because it was a prisoner transport and something that I could say probably is pretty common in the Star Wars universe is people trying to break out prisoners, which we actually did see in The Mandalorian, if we can refer to that. A reinforce seems like a good choice, right? They're trying to hunker down, not take as much damage, have those shields hold a little bit longer before everything goes kaboom. Now, as for the boost action, you might be wondering, well, you put boost in the ship ability, why would you also give it the boost action? Well, because the ship ability is a boost action, you can't do a double boost. But the thought here is that if you wanted the ability to boost without the penalty of the deplete token, but then not being able to take an action, this is another way. It gives you a little bit of flexibility and options on the chassis. Now let's go ahead and hit those stats. In our reference materials, it talks about the fact that this ship actually has, and you can see it in the picture there, it has a lot of rotating cannons, and it has a couple of fixed ones to the back. Now when I was putting this together, I was like, well, then you could argue that it has like a front arc, a back arc, and a turret arc. And I figured, like, for game balance, that probably isn't a good thing to put out there. So let's go ahead and try to make something a little bit different and creative, but that could maybe address all the options that it has. So what I did is I gave it a forward arc with 3 attacks. So, you know, you have all the guns pointing to the front, or it has a bunch of guns pointing to the front. We're going to get 3 attack dice. Now I'm going to go ahead and also give it a 2 dice turret. You can point this wherever you want, including to the back, and cover different options. You can have, of course, have your front arc and have it to either of the sides, very similar to the Hawk with the Moldy Crow title. You got a lot of options for that arc, essentially being able to create a 180-degree arc with your ship. I think originally the ship probably would have had 1 agility, but I'm thinking with the modifications we can bump it up to 2. Now, as for the amount of hull and shield, some people might look at this and say, wow, this seems like a lot. Well, it's a prisoner transport, and I went ahead and looked also at other medium-based ships and other factions, and they're from like 8 to 10 health total. And I'm figuring, you know, this is going to be a prisoner transport, should be a pretty tough ship, plus any mods. So we're going to go ahead and give it 4 hull and 6 shields to show off that robustness. Not too much hull, but there's a lot of shields backing up that 4 hull. Lastly, there's a force point here, and the numbers change depending on the pilot, and I did make a couple of pilots for fun here. So let's go ahead and talk about the Knights of Ren and why I put a force charge on this card as well. The Knights of Ren are basically dark side user adjacent, in a way that they would have been, and actually this is a quote from the Visual Dictionary, they would have been good stock for Inquisitors, but they were never trained in the dark side. Like, they don't know how to use a lightsaber, they can't, you know, force push or do any of those things, but they have the intuition of somebody that is force sensitive, and it shows in their battles and when they're fighting against other people. And that force sensitivity does show itself in battle. The next question here is, what upgrade slots are we going to give this ship? Originally, I was thinking about putting a turret as an upgrade possibility for the Night Buzzard, but since we baked it into one of the primary weapons, we're not going to go ahead and do that. As for the other upgrade slots, I'm thinking initially my concept would have these. So first we're going to go ahead and give it a title slot, and the title card would of course be the Night Buzzard. An optional title probably. I don't know, maybe we make it baked in, maybe we give it some type of other special ability, but as of right now, we'll assume, of course, it's going to have a title card. We're going to give it 1 mod slot because they like to modify their ship. I'm thinking this is where we're getting a little twisty here. We're going to give it an illicit slot. These guys, while we're playing in the First Order faction, they are, you know, they're First Order adjacent. Like, they work for Kylo, spoilers here, but at the same time, they're not really part of the First Order fleet. So I'm thinking, why not give them an illicit slot? You know, they're kind of scummy, you know, they're scummy looking. I don't know, maybe, that's my thought. We're also going to give it a device slot, 1 gunner slot, and 2 crew. Now, in the Visual Dictionary, it actually says that they can take up to 4 gunners, but I think that sounds a little ridiculous in the scope of X-Wing to have 4 gunner slots, so I figure, you know, we kind of mix that up with crew and an actual gunner slot, and maybe over time as the ship develops with point changes and slot changes, maybe we add a 2nd gunner slot, or maybe we need to take some away to tone it down a bit. So now we're going to go ahead and jump into the pilots, but before we do that, I do want to take a second and let's look at our first pilot here, Oplek. Before I talk about his ability, if you notice, I gave him a force value of 2 in the stats, but what you might not notice is the fact that it does not have a reoccurring charge symbol. Now my thought here is, while the Knights of Ren are, again, like I said, force adjacent users, you know, they would be able to have access to the force, you know, in maybe a moment or 2, depending on what's going on, but they wouldn't be able to refresh it and use it as consistently as someone who has had formal training. So this number is not going to be reoccurring. Once you use it, it's gone, and I'm thinking some of them could be used for abilities, you can hold on to them, or of course use their native effect as well. Now, as for Aplik, I'm going to go ahead and give him 2 force charges. Now, his ability says, during the system phase, you may spend 1 force charge to treat your initiative as 7 during the activation phase. Now, in our information with him, we know that he is sneaky. He is a strategist. So my thought here is give this kind of tricksy ability where you can mess around with movement order. You're still shooting at initiative 1, but you could create some tactical confusion by moving later, by moving at initiative 7, and maybe taking advantage of some of those other abilities you have. Next, at initiative 3, we have Ushar with a force value of 1. His ability reads, after you execute a maneuver, you may drop a bomb. Pretty straightforward. It is moving. Now, notice that this does not say mines, only bomb. And this would, in my opinion, still fall under that same rules, as you can only drop 1 at a time, you know, during your system phase, and then with this ability. But I thought it could be cool, you know, we literally see, you know, thermal detonators on his chest. I think it could be interesting. He's talked about as someone who likes to just rain terror in an area, so bombs seem to fit that description. At initiative 4, we have Cardo. Now, his ability reads, after you perform a primary attack, you may perform a bonus attack against a different target. Now, in our materials, Cardo is basically, he is wild. He's just rapid fire everywhere, while these other knights are all about precision and basically one-on-one combat. Cardo he's a spray and pray guy. He's just shooting everywhere, and since you only have access to a single modifier most of the times, you know, outside of, you know, being coordinated and things like that, the double attack probably won't get too oppressive, but of course, anytime you can attack more than once, it seems pretty good, even if it's against another target. So this one is a candidate probably for points end up rising in time, because I think this is the one that most people would jump on first. But initiative 4 puts it in that middle ground where, you know, it's not the ace out there shooting twice. And last but not least, we have initiative 5, Karuk. His ability reads, after you receive a deplete token, you may instead gain a strain token. So in canon, Karuk is the actual pilot for the Knights of Ren. He's the one that knows how to fly the ship the best, essentially. The thought is with the other pilots that they could manage in a situation, but he is the guy. Now, the thought here is being able to manipulate that ship ability that forces you to take a deplete token if you use it. The thought here is, hey, if situationally, if we're not going to get shot, if we think we're safe, we can change that to a strain token. That way we can hit still as hard as we were. Let's say maybe we had a range 1 shot and we're out of everybody's arc. And you take the strain and say, hey, I'll clear next turn with a blue maneuver. But he has the ability to divert power to where he wants rather than where the ship wants. So that is what I would do for the Night Buzzard. Now, let me know in the comments down below how you would build out this ship. Maybe give me abilities for some of the other knights I didn't cover. I look forward to continuing this series. I have a lot of fun with this, and I'm looking forward to actually working on another ship from The Rise of Skywalker pretty soon. And of course, we're going to cover the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian and other ships that we've seen in those series and future Star Wars media. Thanks for watching. Make sure to leave any suggestions for other ships in the comments down below. We'll talk to you later. Gold Squadron out.